This is a summary of Liars, a book by 𝗂𝗂𝗃 Sunstein. Legal scholar 𝗂𝗂𝗃 Sunstein wisely notes that America's freedom of speech never has been absolute. Perjury, false advertising, and other types of untruths are illegal. He argues that courts can and should remove First Amendment protection for harmful falsehoods, such as so-called deepfake videos and images of public figures that liars create by harnessing artificial intelligence. Misinformation has become ubiquitous as false statements proliferate online, particularly on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms. Widespread falsehoods about government officials and agencies generate negative consequences, Sunstein writes, and endanger democratic self-government. Let's hear the first takeaway. The United States should limit free speech by punishing people who spread harmful falsehoods. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. made the famous statement that free speech does not permit someone to falsely yell "fire" in a crowded theater. Yet today, many people make false claims equivalent to yelling "fire" in a crowded theater, bringing consequences ranging from illness and death to the destruction of democratic self-government. Falsehoods include both false statements by people who think they're true and lies by people who know they're lying. These distinctions matter in determining what, if any, regulatory penalty should apply to a liar or to someone who makes a mistake. Penalties for falsehoods could discourage robust dissent. Generally, self-governed societies protect liars. Correcting falsehoods is usually better for democracy than censoring or sanctioning them might prove to be. The U.S. Constitution allows the government to do more to deter defamation, and it should by punishing falsehoods that threaten public health, safety, and the functions of democracy. However, banning all falsehoods would crush freedom because they are part of daily discourse. Falsehoods and jokes and satire are harmless, but some falsehoods are harmful. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution should provide different levels of protection to falsehoods, depending upon the state of mind of speakers and the likelihood, timing, and magnitude of harm their false statements cause. The First Amendment should provide more protection to speakers who mistakenly spread falsehoods than it gives to deliberate liars whose statements cause imminent peril. Okay, time for takeaway 2. Counterspeech holds that the best response to false speech is more true speech. Counterspeech opposes government censorship and holds that the best corrective to false speech is more true speech. In choosing how to combat harmful lies, the public sector should label false content as untrue and should limit its distribution. Many lies are wrong because they enable or inflict harm or take liberty or property from others. People have a property interest in their reputation under common law, and libel erodes its value. The practice of shaming public figures by publicly making allegations about them, also known as cancel culture, often springs from libelous statements. The First Amendment protects liars if they do not cause grave harm, according to a 2012 Supreme Court ruling. Today, society should reassess the claims that falsehoods deserve legal protection and ask instead if destructive lies are a potentially excessive price to pay for freedom of speech. For example, in the 2012 case United States v. Alvarez, the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment prevented the prosecution of 𝗂𝗵𝗆 for falsely claiming he received a Congressional Medal of Honor. Alvarez, who said he served as a Marine and received the military honor in 1987, faced a criminal charge of violating the Stolen Valor Act. The Supreme Court decision shielding him from prosecution was wrong, even preposterous. Alvarez never defended himself by claiming he was joking or intoxicated. The justices who shared the majority opinion emphasized protecting freedom of speech and promoting counterspeech as a preferred alternative to punishing liars. The government has made certain types of lying punishable, such as committing perjury or lying to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI. The Alvarez decision was a triumph for all liars. Here's the next takeaway. Social media increasingly serve as platforms for false claims that endanger democracy. The spread of falsehoods is a growing consequence of social media usage. This online trend, which accelerated after the Alvarez decision, demonstrates the need for a regulatory response. Democracy requires freedom of speech, but the spread of false statements about government officials and agencies endangers democracy. History indicates that when governments reduce the spread of falsehoods, they discourage dissent. Yet the United States has preserved freedom of speech while outlawing fraud, false advertising, perjury, and impersonation of an FBI agent. Such illegal deceptions are usually harmful. On the other hand, some kinds of false statements produce public benefits. For example, analyzing falsehoods can reveal the thinking of those who spread them. Truth bias refers to the human tendency to recall as true a statement people initially knew was false. People are more likely to fall prey to truth bias than to remember that a statement they once knew as true is, in fact, false. In a study of truth bias, jurors could not discount negative information about criminal defendants even when they knew it was incorrect. Okay, let's move on to takeaway 4. Novelty, conformity, and group polarization propel falsehoods that spread farther and faster than the truth. The argument that counterspeech effectively addresses falsehoods is fragile because evidence indicates that falsehoods spread more than truth. Novelty may be one reason. People tend to prefer novel information, even if it isn't true. Dartmouth professor 𝗂𝗓𝗄 𝗂𝗂𝗍 and 2 MIT colleagues found that Twitter users reacted to false rumors with more disgust and surprise than they expressed when reacting to true statements. Conformity propels the spread of falsehoods. People depend on each other's statements when they have sound reasons to believe them. Psychologist Solomon Asch conducted classic experiments in which he put a line on a large white card and asked 8 people to find a line of the same length among 3 lines on another large white card. Only one of the 8 people was the actual subject of the experiment. When the other 7 correctly matched the lines, the subject did so also and reached a wrong conclusion less than 1% of the time. But when the other 7 falsely identified lines of different lengths as the same length, the subject erroneously conformed to the group's opinion 36.8% of the time. Group polarization also propels the online spread of both innocent and deliberate lies. Such proliferation occurs when a group's discussion leads members to adopt a more extreme point of view than they held prior to the conversation. Here's another takeaway. Defamation law can deter libel and slander and compensate victims of both. In the United States, laws against defamation vary by state, but generally, libel is written defamation and slander is verbal defamation. Laws against defamation can lead to deterring the defamer and compensating victims. However, counterspeech may not stop the spread of lies, especially when the liars and their listeners employ motivated reasoning to embrace falsehoods because they enjoy believing them. From the ratification of the Bill of Rights in 1791 up until 1963, the Supreme Court essentially allowed states to devise and enforce defamation laws as they wished. This decision derived from the widespread understanding that freedom of speech under the First Amendment excludes certain types of statements. This legal landscape shifted when the Supreme Court ruled in New York Times Company versus Sullivan. L.B. Sullivan was the police commissioner in Montgomery, Alabama, when civil rights organizations published an ad in the Times condemning the police department's brutal response to civil rights protesters. The ad included falsehoods about the police. Sullivan, though not named in the advertisement, filed a lawsuit alleging libel. He won $500,000 from a state court that determined the ad harmed him in his public office. But the Supreme Court decided that, constitutionally, a public official can recover libel damages only if the speaker had actual malice toward the official. Sullivan held that speakers can be held to have committed libel if they knowingly tell lies or make statements with reckless disregard for their veracity. A different standard of libel applies to private individuals. In 𝗀𝗋𝗄 versus Robert Welch, Inc., the Supreme Court ruled that ordinary people can recover libel damages if they can prove a disputed statement was false, harmful, and negligent. In Sullivan and 𝗀𝗋𝗄, the Supreme Court tried to adjust the degree to which its rulings chill speech, discouraging it through self-censorship. In explaining its 𝗀𝗋𝗄 ruling, the court warned against such a chilling impact and said freedom of speech means allowing certain lies to grant protection to truths. All right, let's now hear the 6th takeaway. Libel litigation fails to address the full range of problems that false statements cause. To recover libel damages, public figures must prove actual malice, while ordinary people must prove negligence. The popularity of social media makes it unclear if these Supreme Court rules still provide a correct balance between freedom and restraint. While spreading libel and falsehoods is easy today, so is correcting them. Twitter and Facebook warn users about false content, and they post disclosures with subject matter information. Perhaps the law should require all social media platforms to enact these practices. Legal force could come from the expectation that print publications, broadcast companies, and social media platforms must publish corrections of defamatory statements. The law could also require those who publish incorrect information to pay modest damages and to take down defamatory web content. Facebook's strategy of pushing defamatory content to the bottom of its news feed, where it remains out of sight of most users, could be the seed of a new industry standard. Libel litigation is a limited remedy that doesn't address the full range of public harm that false statements generate, including lies about the tax system, the justice system, public safety, and public health. The immediacy, likelihood, and seriousness of certain libelous statements offer legitimate grounds for a damage award. Deepfakes created through machine learning or AI can behave in ways that resemble libel. These fakes can show images of people doing or saying whatever the video's creators choose, sometimes with defamatory results. Deepfakes and doctored videos could undermine a political campaign or affect elections. For example, a doctored video might falsely depict a candidate as intoxicated, law-breaking, or unpatriotic. We've reached the seventh and final takeaway. The government should regulate or outlaw deepfake images and videos that employ artificial intelligence to deceive viewers. The government can regulate deepfakes or outlaw them if they pose a serious threat of reputational damage. A new legal framework might include fines for violators, using current libel law as a basis, and could create a property right to your individual reputation. The government could regulate non-defamatory falsehoods that seriously harm the political process. Facebook banned deepfakes in 2019. However, it did not ban doctored videos and deepfakes that depict actions but don't make statements. Facebook has allowed political campaigns to post falsehoods. Ahead of the 2018 midterm elections, Facebook took down posts with deliberate factual errors about the election date and voter eligibility requirements. Still, Facebook and other social media distribute misinformation that casts a shadow on the future of democracy. That was a summary of LIARS, a book by Cass R. Sunstein. Let's recap the 7 takeaways. Takeaway 1. The United States should limit free speech by punishing people who spread harmful falsehoods. Takeaway 2. Counter speech holds that the best response to false speech is more true speech. Takeaway 3. Social media increasingly serve as platforms for false claims that endanger democracy. The 4th takeaway. Novelty, conformity, and group polarization propel falsehoods that spread farther and faster than the truth. Takeaway 5. Defamation law can deter libel and slander and compensate victims of both. Takeaway 6. Libel litigation fails to address the full range of problems that false statements cause. And the final takeaway. The government should regulate or outlaw deepfake images and videos that employ artificial intelligence to deceive viewers.